Well, Jason, we're at a very important part of the Claremont Showground. It's the remembrance plaque on the front and a little plaque on the top. And this is perhaps the only little section of Claremont Speedway, or to remember Claremont Speedway, that's left in the showground now.
Yeah.
This front plaque was donated by the Friends of Claremont Speedway, which is the average fan and competitor who they donated money to get this plaque made, and it represents the 17 competitors that their lives were taken here at the track. And the plaque on top was donated by the Veteran Speedway Riders Association of Australia. And this represents that the Claremont Speedway was a motorcycle racing circuit. Two very important parts of what's left of Claremont Speedway here at the showground.
Now this, some people will come here and just look at it as a plaque, like you do in most memorials, all that kind of stuff, but it's actually closure for some people, Pedro.
It is, Jace. I was lucky enough to be here when this plaque was unveiled by Mr. Chum Taylor, and that was on the 9th of November 2008. And I happened to speak to quite a few of the family of some of these fallen riders, and a couple of them said to me how much this has helped them handle the past and what happened to their loved ones, and that it is closure for them. Some had never been back to Claremont after the accident, and this was sort of like an outlet for them, and they could sit and talk to others. So it's done a very good job as being a memorial, and it's a good place to just come and sit and ponder about the past and make you realise how lucky we all are.
Yeah. People like me that didn't see these accidents sort of happen and because of time and all that, no one wants to see those things, but they do happen.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see that they are remembered, but it's a nice plaque, and it's great that it's still here, and people should come down and just have a look at it, because it is something special, and it's the only thing that is here.
Yeah, I'd like to say thanks to Phil Padden and Nev Risley, who went out of their way to organise this plaque on the front to happen. Without people like Nev and Phil, things like this may never happen, and it takes people that are dedicated and fans of the sport. So thanks to those guys.
Well, hello everyone, welcome to Slightly Sideways. In this episode we've got an absolute fantastic legend with us, and another legend beside me, co-host here, Pedro, the cartoon man for Claremont Speedway. This man to our left is none other than Phil Flyers Myers, one of the best sedan racers and great personalities of the 70s, 80s era at Claremont Speedway. Pedro, would you like to kick it off with a couple of questions to our special guest today?
Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Pedro. Been a few years.
Look, mate, I was looking back to see how far back you go, and actually I found this. Hot Rod Racing at Forestfield Circuit.
Yeah, okay.
Now, it hasn't got a date on, but we agree it's around the late 50s.
Yes.
58, 59, something like
Wouldn't
that.
be any later than that.
Any later than that. And opening the cover, here is number 12, Phil Myers V8 off 30 yards. Now I'm thinking, is Flyers Myers beginning of his career, long and illustrious? And you tell me, how many events did you do at Forestfield?
I think I only raced there once, maybe twice. And I finished up, they used to have a real muddy clay pit it was out there at Forestfield, and a lot of water in big pools around the track where they used to bulldoze the dirt out. Anyhow, I finished up into one of these lakes of water upside down, and I thought, I don't like this.
And that was pretty much the end of that
That
start.
was the end of that Speedway career.
So what kind of car did you have?
It was a 39 Ford flathead V8.
Okay.
And I acquired this car. I took the body off the chassis, cut 16 inches off the doors, and took the mudguards off it, put some knobbly tyres on it, a roll cage hoop, and went racing. I thought, well, it didn't work out too good.
So after you hit the lake, you gave it away then?
Gave it
and
away,
thought, that's not for you.
That's right.
And what happened then?
Well, I was in business as an apprentice then, as an apprentice songwriter, and I started to get more interested again by painting a few of the speed cars with the signs and painting them. And there was several there with Happy Birthday Brian McKay,
Yep.
Laurie Matthews, Bill Jost, Arthur McDonald.
Yeah.
Arthur McDonald had a very unique car. It was a car where their driver sat on the side of the car and the engine was on the other side of the car. But that didn't perform too well, but it was a very, very
They called it the
unique
Roadster,
car.
I think, didn't they? They
The
called it
Roadster,
Roadster.
yeah.
Yep.
Anyhow, that's where I created an interest back into Speedway.
Yeah.
And at that, earlier than that, I used to race push bikes down at Claremont Speedway. When I was only 15, I think 15, maybe 16, we used to race around the oval, not skid kids, we used to race actually around the oval. And we used to always look for the inside run, because that was the hard part. On the outside run, it was always a bit rougher where the cars had been.
Yep.
And well, I was back on 135 yards back from the start line. They were all handicap races, 2 laps. And we used to race there, and then bikes. And of course, the interest sort of grew again about the real speedway, not mud hole, but
Yeah.
Forest
Field, yeah.
and we used to sit up in Fowl House after us, watch the speedway. Donnie Hall, Ron Hall. I forget. There's quite a few
Yeah.
drivers, and the drivers I mentioned, Harry Van Len.
Yeah.
Who else? Oh, there's quite a few. Anyhow, and then I'd hop on the bike and ride home to Gosselins at 11 o'clock at night,
Well, that's keen.
and that's what we did in that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then where did I go to then? I think I got into rallying. Somebody came in and said, would you like to go into rallying? I'll navigate for you. So I started rallying for probably 20 years.
Right.
I had quite a few successes, a few failures, a few rollovers, which you do in rallying. It's pretty bad for rolling over at rally cars.
Yeah.
You overdo it and off the road, and you've got to try and pick the gaps in the trees.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we went from there, I think, into Speedway. I think we went back into Speedway through Con Migro. He used to come round and was a paint rep for Warpure Paints. And he used to call around to our premises and sell us paint. And he was a mad keen, I shouldn't say it, but a mad keen solo enthusiast.
It was, yeah.
Well, I think he still is under, you know.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we got friendship with Con, and then later on, when I thought, well, we'll have a go at Speedway after rallying, because I got a bit tired of rallying, and then and rallying was dictated to by events that were navigation events and not driving events. So it doesn't matter how hard you drive your car, they'd always get knocked out through some technicality, through navigation, trying to find hidden roads that were behind trees and whatever else that was out there.
Okay.
And I got a bit pissed off with that and the finish. So I don't know. I know how I got into Speedway. I tried to find a car, and I found a Tirana in Canberra, of all places, used from David House. They used to race around a bitumen circuit, no bitumen cars. So I purchased this car and got it loaded on a transport truck on its way over here. When it landed in Perth, guess what? Somebody got into the thing and took the 3 Weber carburetors and manifold off the engine. So Speedway didn't go anywhere for a little short time until I located some new carburetors, which we used Delautos in, which were a copy of a Weber, and put those on. And I went down nominated for Speedway, went down there, knew nothing about driving around Speedway, and got out on the track, and I think I'm not too sure where I started. I think I was back towards the back. I think we used it with first year drivers, you start at the back. And the track was swamped with water. Kenny Ditchfield in those days used to put a lot of water on the track early in the nights. And I went out in my first race, and all the big V8 boys all speared off into the fence and spun out infield, and I just chuffed around with this car that, unbeknown to me, was on bitumen racing suspension.
Right.
Which is, with bitumen racing cars, you have slick tyres and hard suspension, because there's, you know, well, on wet dirt, it was unbelievably bad. So I learnt real quick, I've got to learn how to set a car up. And, you know, I finished third in my first race because everybody else fell off the track. Good result.
Now, between the first little bit of Speedway to the actual Speedway career starting was 20 years, you were saying.
20
and
years.
you're about 38 years old, somewhere around there?
I was 38 when I got to Speedway,
Yeah.
which I should have been there 20 years before.
Imagine if you had been.
Oh, yeah.
One would never know.
Well, you got there, that's the main
Yes,
thing.
That's it.
So that would have been about 74, 75 season that you
About
started
75,
75.
75 maybe.
Yeah.
78 was my hot year. 75,
Yeah.
76. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And you had Tiranas?
I had my Tirana then,
Yep.
which I'd learnt a lot in a very short period of time with the first car I'd purchased, and what I had to do in regards to set up, you know, suspension, stuff like that. And I thought, I'm going to build my own car, and with the help of a guy called Harry McDonald in his backyard workshop, we got together and created my little monster here.
Beautiful.
And we put a lot of work into that. Well, I think everybody puts a lot of work into their cars, but I was really particular with a lot of things. The engine we had was a 202, which was bought out 60,000. I acquired a aluminium head, a cross-slide head for a 202, which nobody at Perth had ever seen. They were a Phil Irving head made on the East Coast. And that was a big part of the success of the car. But combined with other stuff, I acquired McGee fuel injection for the methanol, which nobody had ever used McGee injection. They were road racing stuff on the East Coast.
Right.
I got a quick change diff made by Brian Sadler for performance modifications.
Yep.
And he had some castings there from way back when, because Brian was an old man then. And he made me up a diff which was made for the old supermods, and they were between a speed car diff and a V8 diff, but I only had a 6 cylinder, so we made a lot lighter diff.
Yep.
And acquired the gears and put a watch linkage on it. I played with the springs. You know, I did a lot of work trying to get the balance of the car, jack the right front wheel right out, so that when you cooked the car in the corner, the back didn't pass the front, and you steered on that right front.
Pretty tight.
Wow.
And all those things that other guys at that time weren't doing. All the boys in the V8s, they just be, especially when it was wet, they were uncontrollable. They had great big tyres on, the big balloon tyres from sprint cars.
Yeah.
And I had midget tyres.
Yeah.
Little midget tyres from Go Gear, and they were soft compound ones. Used to wear a bit of rubber out, but oh gee, they were good. And that's how we just killed these V8s.
So
Can we have a look?
Yeah, grab the what Phil's referring to. While you have a look at that, Pedro, 2 seconds. So you were like a sign writer, but you really got into the technical bits of making the car, you know, perform and innovation of the Tirana.
Yep, caster and camber is so important. And you know, you just, even today, it's all about shock absorbers. Or in my day, the shock absorbers weren't important like they are today. You had spring rates and changed the length of the springs to get more weight jacking on the car when it was in the corners. And sometimes out of the corners, this thing was so hard to hang on to because so much caster on the right front. I used to just try and tear the steering wheel out of my hands on a hard track. And it used to understeer a bit in the corners. But by that time that happened, the other cars that far behind, they never caught me anyway. So it didn't really worry me. I just jammed the brakes on and keep turning left.
So this beautiful model has been handmade by Jerry Kolk.
Yes.
For you?
Yes. Just recently.
Just recently. And if you look at it, it's got Red Bull on it. Now most people today think of Red Bull as a liquid
drink, energy drink.
But Red Bull back in the 70s
was a hamburger chain.
Hamburgers. And it was pretty big.
Mark Tyndale was the man.
Right. Okay.
And I acquired that through an advertising agency, which I knew one of the guys. He organised the contact with Red Bull to get the sponsorship for the car, and that's how Red Bull evolved then. But after my Speedway, the Red Bull got sold out to, I think it was through the other hamburger chain here.
Okay.
Got sold out.
And that changed colours a few times too, that car.
Yeah, it went from yellow to black.
Yeah.
Or from black to yellow. It went from black to yellow.
Yeah.
That's about it.
So in the early 80s, we remember
80s.
the Jaguar.
About 83?
83? Something like that?
Before that, we had the American team out here.
Yeah.
American sedan teams.
Yes.
And
Big Ed Wilbur and the boys.
Big Wilbur, Gene Welsh.
Yeah.
And that car wiped them off the
Blitzed
track.
Blitzed them.
So tell us about that.
Yeah.
When you take that Tirana out, what was their perception when they rock up with their American,
Big V8s.
big V8s and,
Well, again,
Great
they were
natural
all
types.
over-tired. This is the trouble with all the boys in the big V8s. Got to have big tyres. But I used to run the speed car tyres. Smaller tyres, soft compounds.
Yeah.
And in the dirt, like now, the dirt is so much different on racetracks than what it was in those days. But in those days, it got a bit sloppy at times with the water, and they couldn't handle it. And I used to take advantage, get underneath them, hook them out.
Yeah. Were you an aggressive driver or were you more smooth? I remember only as a kid was pretty smooth.
Probably aggressive.
Yeah, okay. There you
Because
go.
I was caught, sometimes they called me Filthy Phil.
Who called you that? Con wouldn't have done that, surely.
No, other competitors. It was Filthy Phil because I used to get underneath them.
Yeah, push them away.
But
Yeah. Well,
they used to help me win races too.
the Minis did that a decade earlier.
Of course.
Didn't they? They'd get underneath and push their way through, and that's what made them famous.
Yeah.
So
Now it's just the opposite. They do slide jobs.
That's right, yeah. It's
yeah.
totally different.
Yeah.
No, awesome.
So moving forward to the Jaguar, how did all that come about?
Well, before the Jaguar, when I got out of Speedway, I had a son, Gavin, who was interested, and I decided to build a Mini for my boy.
Yeah, junior sedan.
Well, that was a giant killer too.
Yeah. And they were modified back then. They weren't just the juniors of today. They had big wheels, flares on them. They were tough looking little cars.
Yeah, he won a state title with that car, Claremont, and a few of the modifications I did with that car, I run a Weber on the motor, 1310 motor, but just a single Weber, quite a few others used to run twin Webbers and use one big throat, a 50mm throat out of the Weber, 48mm throat, sorry, out of the Weber. I used to run 45mm choke on one carburetor, which maintained the torque. They had these great big things that didn't have any torque. It didn't have power off the turns. And this little Mini used to go like hell. I put 13-inch wheels on it with racing rubber, Wanneroo type card rubber, soft, and I used to groove them up. So I had big wheels in the front, had little 10-inch wheels on the back. The big beam axle, which used to be in the back of the Mini, which used to have all the suspension built into it, I hoisted all that out of the car. Made the roll cage with only the main hoop was regulation, but the supports and all of the back of the car were way undersized stuff, light tubing. And I put a beam axle, made an exhaust tube across the back, and put 2 coilover motorbike shock absorbers on the back wheels.
Okay.
And no ball, but you could actually lift the back of the car up and wheel like a wheelbarrow.
Wow.
No weight on the back.
Yeah.
It was all on the front wheels. And he was successful with that. I took that I decided I was going to have a go on the Australian sedan titles at Darwin.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry son, but I'm taking the car. So we went to Darwin. Oh, that was another funny trick going up there.
Yeah, tell us. We can come back and forth. We can jump around and do whatever you want.
Whatever, mate.
Out of Carnarvon, driving into the sun about 7:30 in the morning or something or other, on the Bitchin Road with a trailer on the back, with the Mini on the back. My wife and 4 kids in the back of the XC van, honking along there. Next minute, what was that? A wheel goes past us.
Right.
A wheel come off the bloody trailer. Boing, boing, boing in the bush. Never found it. In the meantime, I hooked me off the road, and I went across the road, down in the roads had built up, and I was going down the road sideways in the van with the trailer behind pushing me, trying to get back on the Bitchin Road without, and luckily nobody came out.
Yep.
They just sheer like.
Yeah.
Wow. As my brother would say, if it wasn't for the experience, we would all have been killed. Speedway experience, we would have been killed.
So we got to Darwin, and there's a lot of cars up there. There's a couple of other Minis up there, but our little Mini, in my opinion, shone. After the qualifying heats, we finished up 6th out of, there's a bundle of cars there. 6th out for the final.
Yeah.
But I missed being on pole because they disqualified me on one of the heats for underneath
Being a bit
hooking,
aggressive.
being a bit too aggressive.
Yeah.
So I got
Not
disqualified.
very fair.
But I still finished up 6th in the feature race.
Okay.
And I was holding my position after quite a few laps. And the big V8s used to get up alongside me a bit down the straights, but I just get them in the corners, you know.
Yeah.
And the next one, tap, tap, bang from the outside rear quarter panel, it was Laurie Hardy. Just getting back
In the Monaro.
in the Monaro and sent me right into the wall
Oh, great.
at the end of the straight.
Yeah.
So that was the end of that.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we had some fun, and it was for the size of the car, what the car was, it was great.
So how did you and Laurie get on after that?
I've never got on with Laurie very
No?
well. No,
Okay.
no. A lot of the guys do, but I just didn't cut it with Laurie, and it was really good to stick it up in.
That's what we like to hear.
So, I must digress before we get on to the famous Jaguar, or the infamous Jaguar, whichever way you want to look at it. You were 3rd in the state title in 77-78 to behind Laurie Hardy and Alan Blake,
Yeah.
according to the record books. You won the Lawson Medal in 77-78, so you had a good season
Yep.
Yeah.
then. And in 1980-81,
Won the Winfield as well that year too.
Did you?
Winfield Award.
okay, and 80-81 you were runner-up to Ben Ludlow Jr. in the state title.
81.
Yeah, 80-81.
I think that was in the ex-Stephendale SLR
Okay.
that I acquired on short. A quick decision, and I thought I'd go racing, and I bought this car, and I got stitched up a bit, but
Financially?
no, there was some parts in the car that when I picked the car up a couple of days after I said, yeah, I want it, there's bits missing.
Mm.
But anyhow, that's another story.
Mm.
But
Plenty of them.
it was only a 308, and in those days, the V8s had got better and better, and they handled better, and it was just lacking in horsepower, you know. I know we went out to race against the Yanks again in that year, and I didn't perform at all like I wanted to, and that was not what I was about. Winning beats the hell out of losing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got rid of that real quick.
Yeah.
All right, we might take a quick break and thank some of our sponsors for the show and come back and talk with Phil some more. And I'm sure he's got some plenty of good stories coming for us. So stick around and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back with our talk with Phil Flyers Myers. It's been great so far, and Phil's got plenty of stories. Tons of them, actually. We could probably be here for hours and hours, like most of our guests. Now, Pedro, would you like to kick the second part off with a question to Phil?
Yes. Phil, you just mentioned to us you had a big crash at Bunbury. Was that in Tirana?
In the SLR, yes.
In the SLR?
Yes, yes.
Tell us about that.
Going into, well, first of all, there was a stunt man down there doing acts where he rolled cars over. It's a bit of a entertainment package. Well, he had trouble rolling over. He had a couple of goes of rolling over and couldn't get the cars to roll over. They just slip and slide. They wouldn't dig in, and of course they wouldn't roll over. So that wasn't that very successful. But anyhow, I went into turn one in the feature race, and next minute I'm airborne. The right rear hub snapped, all the spokes snapped, and shot because we used the big wheels now, so the 33 inch wheels, and shot it under the back of the car, and next minute the car was somersaulting from the rear, end to end. And every panel come off the damn thing. I was just sitting there in a white chassis. And that wasn't too good.
So did you ask the stuntman for his fees for the night? Because you did a
No,
better
well, he
job
made
than
a
him.
comment after. He says, "How'd you do that?" He says, "I couldn't do that." Anyhow, we took the car home, and I think I patched up and got rid of it.
So that was the end of the Tirana.
End of that run, yes.
At Tirana, did you
Yes.
go into another one, or
No,
were
no.
you're then talking about Jaguars?
Yeah, I had this dream about building a car that was different to what the norm was, and the thing that bobbed up was a V12 Jaguar.
How did it bob up as well?
Yeah, what?
How did that come about where I'm going to just do something radical and then it's a V12 Jag? How does that?
Well, the V12 Jag, I thought that's got to work. Even though it's a heavy engine, I said it's got to work and it's going to look good too. You know, it's a good looking car. Anyhow, I thought about it for a while, and then I contacted Roadbend Motors up in Washington, and they let me get to a dark green V12 Jaguar in their yard, and I spent the next few weeks up there in between working in my paint shop, diving back up to Washville, and made a plaster cast of the whole car. Dead set.
Yeah, right.
Well, that was a comedy of experience.
Yeah, I bet.
And
I mean,
all this
innovative.
plaster over the car, and I made the front separate, and made the roof, made the quarter panels and the boot. So I made a couple of panels, and then when I got those off, I was going to make the other panels. Anyhow, when I come to take because I was anxious to get the panels off the car so I can make fiberglass moulds. Went up there, tried to pull the front off, made the whole front of the car one big piece, which eventually finished like that anyway. One big fiberglass mould. Well, when we went to pick it up, it just collapsed on the bloody metal.
Oh, no. Well, they work.
So, no, it wasn't the finish of it.
Oh, that's good.
So then I located some strips of steel, bits of timber, and put it all back on top of the plaster on the bonnet, because it's a big bonnet in those V12s.
Yeah.
And hence replastered over the top again, added more plaster on. Well, after a couple of weeks of drying, then I finally got off the car. But it was that bloody heavy, it took 3 of us to lift it.
So these were unexpected
Hiccups.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to actually build the body? Like from when you
well,
started
we went
it
on
to-
for many, many weeks, because after, like in between, while I was waiting for this stuff to dry and other things, then we started putting a chassis on it, and designing a chassis, and we made this chassis, and I acquired the front stub axles off a Jaguar, which are big stuff, heavy, not heavy but strong, with big good brakes, and so another thing, like with the speedway cars, you don't use 2-wheel brakes on the front. You only have 1-wheel brake on the right front. So if you've got to hit the brakes, the car will pull you right, not spin out
Yeah.
and understeer. Anyhow, we made a lot of the components. I chased around for a differential for it. So we had to get all these things and work them to go into the chassis. So we finished up, we built the chassis. In the meantime, I was messing around with this bloody body for ages. And I wanted to go, with the motor, we wanted to go dry sun. Now, to get a motor, the motor that I had initially was a stuffed motor from a road car.
Okay.
But the problem with the V12s is the studs that hold the head down into the water jacket, and they corrode up the studs, which means you can't get the heads off. So what I used to do, and I did this over 3 motors, maybe even 4 motors, I used to make wedges and jam them in between the head and the block,
Yep.
and walk around in my paint shop with a bloody sledgehammer, belting these wedges
To get it off.
to force the heads up,
Yeah.
CRC into the holes. And this took a lot of hours, that was just one more thing we had to do.
Yeah.
The Jaguar motor, the crankshaft and the rods and that are pristine, unbelievably good. But I was paranoid about running out of oil, because I knew a Chevy wants about 7 gallons of oil per minute. The Jaguar wanted 11 gallons of oil per minute. A lot bigger engine, a lot more oil. And I was paranoid about that. So we decided to put a 5-stage dry sump system on it, which they use for the road racing. And I got in contact with John McCormack, who used to race one on bitumen on the East Coast with the sports sedans in those days. And got a bit of information out of him. Anyhow, we got this dry sump system, and that was built in with the motor. I acquired, and that was a big thing that wiped me out, the oil system. Anyhow, I then started to look for carburation. I didn't want to use, you had to use methanol, was supposed to be, use methanol, but anyhow, unbeknown to everybody, I cheated a bit there.
But anyhow,
We can bring it out now because it doesn't really matter, so you can just tell everyone. Phil Myers is a cheat. Who thought of
go
it?
for it.
I'm sure everybody cheated back in those days at some point.
I didn't
However,
use
no.
method, I used petrol,
Yeah.
gas. And I got 6 downdraft Weber carburetors. I spent days and days and days round at K-Craft, Kevin Hilgert, who let me go around there. I was good friends with Kev, and made up the inlet manifold with tapered tubes. A lot of work.
So you machined all this, you made so
Made
many
it all
parts.
myself, and they welded it up for me. Where they were extension, tubes to go down on, and the inlet was on top of the motor, facing downwards, not side on.
Right.
So that was a big job in itself. And whilst I also around the K-Craft, I made a lot of other componentry, aluminium stuff, Anyhow, where to get to then? We eventually got the car built. We had to do, I wanted to run a gearbox, because you had to run a gearbox so you had reverse gear in the gearbox. So we had, I think we run second or third gear only, and took a reverse, had left reverse in. And then I got a Muncie gearbox, which is a good heavy American gearbox in those days. Got a Muncie gearbox. I got a high nickel engineer to make me up a clutch plate, the centre plate. I used a triple plate clutch, which I used for all the road race cars. All this stuff was never ever used at Speedway.
Yep.
And I used a automatic ring gear. It was all sandwiched together, and had to use the automatic ring gear to run the starter motor, because you used to have a starter motor on the car. But it was all light stuff, so it was good, because I knew the motor would rev hard. So then I acquired a back end for it, and I didn't want to go for the usual axle that everybody else uses.
Of course not, you haven't done it for the rest of the car, have you?
So
That's amazing. That's
we bought, I acquired a differential which came out of Ian Diffin's Valiant road racing sports sedan,
Yeah.
and it had a CAE quick change diff center. Well, that's what we need, because you're going to change the gearing.
Yeah.
But also had, instead of being a locker, it was a limited slip diff, which nobody ever uses either. And with that was just a centerpiece. And then I acquired for me and Diffin the uprights to hold the wheels. And they were magnesium uprights with half shafts, small shafts. So it was fully independent rear end. Again,
Wow.
Not used.
Yeah.
an idiot like me did it.
Now, during this time, were people obviously knowing about what you were doing? And there were some rules back in those days. I mean, it's probably not as harsh as it is now. Were people putting in like, hang on a minute, he can't do that, he can't, before you go on the track?
No, that never happened.
That's
and it was all kept pretty quiet too.
Yeah, you didn't tell them, did you?
No, it was pretty quiet.
Top
So it was
secret.
just, I was really trying to reinvent the wheel, which is, you just don't do. And, I'm not an engineer, I'm a sign driver.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
You did pretty well, weren't you?
Yeah.
So we built the car and had a dry sump tank in the back of the car, made that around a K-Craft aluminium. And we, what else did we do? I moulded a seat. I went and got a seat, and I got into a seat, and the guys down with me, a bit of a laugh. I got into a raincoat, and I sat on the seat, and they poured the Shell make a urethane product which expands like foam.
Yeah.
Right? and they poured that all around me.
The guinea pig.
And I made a mould
To
of my
fit your body?
Yeah,
God.
because the speedway seats nowadays are just a flat thing like this, you know.
Yeah.
You slip and slide in them, you know.
Yeah.
And I made this mould. And then I thought, I'll make it a bit more comfortable. I'll glue some lamps all over it. Of course, when you got the speedway, all the mud stuck to it like shooting a blanket.
The ideas were there, mate.
Oh, mate, oh, it's crazy. Your brain must have been going like this all the time.
Yeah, it was.
It couldn't have been a cheap exercise what you're doing with the Jaguar.
No. It was just over the top. You know, first I finally got the thing together and went out to Foresthill to try it out. And what happened? Something happened. Anyhow, caught fire.
God.
I think I spun out and did something up there, and a car stopped and it caught fire. And here we are trying to put this damn thing out with all the mud and sand and dirt. What happens is, with the 6 down drive carburetors, they're directly above the motor, and guess what's underneath? The spark plugs. So here we are with fuel flooding, because I never had a pressure valve on the fuel system, and of course it flooded, the fuel ran down into the spark plugs, kaboom.
Bloody
So we got it out, and that happened a couple of times, because we're a bit naive with not knowing the fuel system properly,
Yeah.
which now it's
Yeah.
everybody controls their fuel
Yeah.
to make horsepower. Anyhow, so that was the first experience. Then I got down to Claremont, and I think I did about 6 or 7 laps, and she blew up.
Is that on like a practice day, or you went straight in for a Friday night?
Straight in, yeah, and it blew up. So, anyhow, we got home, pulled the motor apart. The bottom end had just fried with blue. Lack of oil. How could that be? You know, I even went and made a new oil catch tank to redesign that.
Yeah.
Got another motor from a wrecker. Same thing, trying to get the heads off. You know, we eventually built another motor. Out again, another 8 laps. Boom again.
Oh, God.
And your
Another
patience
motor from a wrecker.
starts to drop on.
Where do you find V12 engines?
Well, I was just going to ask you that. They wouldn't have been like, around, a lot of them around, especially second-hand
Yeah.
ones that you can just grab out of a
Of
record.
course, they've all had trouble in the cars with
That's
the
what-
head stud, and they can't get the heads off.
So they,
And somebody designed it later on at Road Bend, where they made cutters and went down the studs and
cut them out.
and cut them out.
Okay.
Anyhow, when this happened, we got back and built another motor, which all took time. That's like this damn thing had 3 years of my life,
Yeah.
and you can see how it happened,
Yeah.
and a lot of money,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But anyhow, Kim organised a guy with a contact with a chap called Van Leeuwen, who used to be the engineer or mechanical guy at Thornley Tech. And we got the motor to the Thornley Technical College, and they run the engine up on an engine dyno. Which today, that if you're going to do it again, that's the first thing you do, is put it on an engine dyno.
Yeah.
Anyhow, they run it up, and all of a sudden they come back. You're only getting 3 gallons of oil per minute
Oh, alarm bells going off there.
straight away,
Yeah.
and the motor wants 11. So then we started looking. Anyhow, we tracked it down. The oil line from the tank to the dry sump pump went out around the front of the motor. Now, in our wisdom, we thought, we'll get these oil lines. Most of the people run with an oil system, they run rubber, inside and out, it's just a rubber tube with canvas lines in it, of course, for the pressure. Well, we thought we'd be smart and get these metal bladed lines that were good on the outside, and the inside is Teflon.
Right.
Very thin Teflon, only a mil thick, mil and a half thick. And Teflon would flow a lot more. It's my paranoid thing about having maximum oil flow.
Yep.
And here we are, this oil system's killing me. What happened was, when the tube, and because the Teflon inside lines, it's rigid, when it got bent around the front of the engine, it kinked.
Restricted it.
And you couldn't see it because they had the metal braided line on the outside.
Yeah.
And that's all it was.
Wow.
So
So how many motors? When you got to the
I
end?
must have did 3 or 4 engines. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Anyhow, another stupid thing we did. I was conscious about having mud or stones that speak, because Speedway's a dirty environment. You know, you get mud and rocks and stuff come up, and if you're running a Gilmer belt, driving an oil pump system or water pump system, whatever, I was quite paranoid about getting stones underneath it, flicking the belt off and blowing the motor up. So I thought, I'll run a chain. So I've got 3/8 chain and run a chain. Went to Bunbury Speedway, going all right. Next minute, bang! The chain broke or fell off, it's had some bloody thing.
Yeah.
And all the valves crashed, all the bloody valve cups, because they had shim valves. You had to get micrometer and measure the thickness of all these shims between the valves and the valve caps. A lot of work putting a head together with 12 cylinders. Hours and hours of work doing the valves. And I just destroyed all the valve gear. And I thought, well, this is the last time it's ever going to do this to me. Now, I broke it up and sold. The back end went to Bert Vosbergen, who run that in his Pantera for a while.
And that didn't go very good either.
No, that didn't go very good. And but then a lot of cars of Bert's didn't go very good either. Bert just fiddled around, you know. Good guy, but anyway, nice story. Another guy took my Webers and the block, and he was going to make it into a table. I don't know where it went after that. And I put a Chev in it, thanks to Doug McPherson.
Ah, righto. Yeah.
And I put a bunky Chev in it, not the iron crank Chev we got from Chev Power. Put that into it, and I think that's when we went out and got 3rd in the state title with it. One of those things.
Wow. Okay.
And then I sold it to a guy called Peter Kerr in Albany,
Okay.
and that was the end of that.
Can I ask, just, I'll jump in before Pedro gives one before we go to a break, but what, without making you cry, what sort of dollars are we talking about back in those days, from the idea to all the engines, the moulds, all that, to where you just went, I'm cutting it up and getting rid of it? What would you estimate that cost
I
you?
dare not say.
Okay, not bad. All right.
My question was going to be, after all that, the anticipation, the work, the disappointments, how many successful laps can you remember doing in that thing? After 3 years, did you have it?
3 years in my life.
3 years of your life.
I probably got 30, 40 laps. That's all.
That's sad, isn't it?
If that.
Mentally, how were you? I mean, you must have been devastated and gone, I'm done with Speedway. I'm never going to do this stuff again because it's just too hard.
Well, yeah. I don't really know how I felt, but I felt pretty bad. Yeah, because it just got hold of me in the finish line. I just couldn't face
Yeah.
work on that engine again.
Yeah.
And yet we put that much thought. We thought that was going to be right, and we just made mistakes.
Well, it's all a learning curve, but when you don't get anything out of it at the end
Yeah.
from all the effort,
Yeah.
that's the disappointing part.
There's just major things, the oil system and the oil pump drive system. And I never ever got to have the car handled, because I know afterwards I was so far out of the ballpark with my spring rates. You know, you run 300-pound springs in it, and miles too soft.
Yeah.
But again, it was just everything was an unknown.
Yeah, and you never had a chance to really get it,
No,
to do it, do
Yeah.
no.
some practice laps
No.
and even get a feel
No,
of
that's
it, because it was, wow, the experiment.
Yeah, wow, there you go. Well, we're going to take another break, thank some more sponsors, and see some pictures of Phil that great photographers have taken over the years, like Brad Fat Rat Steele and Peter Roebuck and Bruce Hunt and all those kind of guys. So we'll come back and keep our chat going with the legend Phil Fliesmeyers. You look a little bit different now, mate. Do you remember this bloke here?
Yeah, I know. Look at that lot, Jesus. Not too good there. Moriarty.
Each photo normally tells a story, Phil, about a place where you might have seen a car or raced on the bit of the track or dealt with that person. Is that what you feel when you walk through a place like this? Is that what you feel when you walk through a place like this?
Yes, yeah. It's the names you've forgotten, and they bring back memories really quick. Jesus.